All right, so one of the skills we need to develop as we are analyzing rhetoric and analyzing arguments is not only the ability to identify them on paper, but also from a visual perspective as well. So we kind of looked at this a little bit on Tuesday when we were examining different photographs and paintings to try to understand the author's tone. But now, what I want to do is work on a little exercise with you, basically trying to understand visual rhetoric through the use of political cartoons, because obviously political cartoons are a form of argument. So we're going to go through. We'll look at some of the key terms you need to understand when you're identifying or looking at political cartoons, as well as these translate to text as well. Some of them are symbols, so they are more of a visual medium. But some of the terms we're going to be looking at are rhetorical devices that you can use when you're analyzing text as well as photos. So you can see here I included a couple cartoons that I found that have to do with COVID-19 crisis. Right here we have "Keep your arms and legs inside the car" during the 2020 school year. So you see, I don't know if those are meant to be kids or if those are meant to be parents or what, but you can see that it's basically setting up the school year as a roller coaster ride. If you look, it's not a typical roller coaster; it's kind of all over the place, and then you have these clouds that are covering up parts of the track, which is basically meant to indicate that we really have no idea what the school year is going to look like. It's a big question mark, but we know it's going to be full of twists and turns. Um, so you can see that kind of argued here in the text. If you look real close, you can see they're just the two people in the roller coaster just kind of looking at each other with a worried face, like, I'm not sure what we're in for, but here we go. And I think that's how a lot of us felt, especially heading into this school year, whether you chose to be in person or learn from a remote perspective. And then, of course, sticking with the COVID-19, you can see four teachers fled in the place of Clorox wipes and Lysol, thoughts and prayers. So obviously, this is a reference to thoughts and prayers whenever any tragedy happens. A lot of times with shootings, they'll say our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and the family. So what the think about what the author, the painter, whatever is trying to, what point are they trying to get across here? I think it really has to do with a lot of school districts just not being sure what this year is going to look like. A lot of teachers, especially you had teachers quit, you had teachers retire before the school year because they felt their school really wasn't doing enough to prepare um, for the COVID crisis, and we thought we'd be seeing all these spikes. Luckily, here at Dayton, I think it's been pretty good. But you can see Lysol and Clorox have been replaced with thoughts and prayer. So just kind of sending the teachers out there with their little cleaning supplies and saying good luck. All right, so let's look at this political cartoon analysis, and I'm going to go through some slides, some key terms with you. Again, this is just for the sake of learning to understand visual arguments. There's absolutely no political affiliation met with any of these cartoons. I feel like I have to say that nowadays. Again, we're not trying to make judgment calls about the content. We're really just trying to understand what the argument is. So these are some of the key terms here that we're going to be looking at. Iconic versus indexical. That's more symbology, so it doesn't really fit with literary devices. We have allusions, which you should know about, substitution, synecdoche, superimposition, fusion, juxtaposition. Again, juxtaposition is a literary term as well. Chiasmus, narrative, and caricature. Let me hide this real quick. All right, so moving forward here. So the difference between basically iconical and indexical symbols are icons are basically any kind of physical resemblance meant to signify either a larger idea or something similar. Index is basically a picture. This is a picture of somebody, something, and it's meant to symbolize this thing. And then, of course, we have symbols. So you can see here, this is the traditional bathroom symbols for man versus woman. Obviously, not everybody looks like this, but we can see this icon and think, okay, this is women's bathroom, this is man's bathroom. See, index, the representation is meant to represent the actual item. So you have a female and a male right there, and then of course you have the universal symbols for male and female. All right, so moving on. I'm gonna hide the tools here. Okay, so an icon sign resembles what it represents. An indexical sign is established through convention. So consider Uncle Sam down here on the left, and then like Pamela Anderson, Kid Rock here. Which character is iconic versus which character is indexical? So just think about that for a second. All right, Uncle Sam is indexical because he represents the United States, so he represents a larger entity. So it's one thing that represents some idea or entity that's larger. And then, of course, you have Pamela Anderson and Kid Rock who represent themselves here. So they are icons of themselves. One important thing to note is indexical signs can change over time. If you look at older pictures of the U.S. or any kind of really any kind of persuasive image that has to do with the U.S., you would see Mrs. Columbia is meant to represent the United States. So you'll see poetry that references Columbia, the District of Columbia. So this was actually the first representation of the United States, and over the years it's kind of switched to Uncle Sam. So when you see Uncle Sam in a political cartoon or a picture, you know, okay, they're referencing the United States in this. One aspect of political cartoons that you'll see a lot is what's called caricatures. So caricatures are basically when they take features of somebody and they kind of blow them up or blow them out of proportion to make some point or to emphasize something about that. So you can see all these political cartoons of George W. Bush. You can see different aspects of him have kind of been changed, made into a caricature to kind of make some statement about it. Here you can see the large ears, kind of the angry look here. Here it's represented as a monkey. So you can see each of these pictures is basically trying to establish some different view of George W. Bush. And it really has to do with the author's feelings. So kind of ties back to tone in a way. All right, so substitution, this is when a prominent visual element is used to symbolize something visually absent. So what's the issue here in this picture? So we have George W. Bush. He's got this big machete, and he's cutting down the middle of a cake. And you can see there are two men on it. So splitting down the middle. So the substitution here is the wedding cake is meant to represent marriage. The issue this is speaking to is really the blocking of gay marriage at the time. It wasn't allowed. How does the color function in the cartoon? So when pink is heavily related to the LGBTQ, so that's kind of what that's meant to represent. What group would sympathize with this cartoon? I would assume the same group. And then what makes the cartoon amusing and at whose expense are they laughing at? So think about all those things when you're analyzing these cartoons. Superimposition. This is when a word on an image or an image on an image creates a visual metaphor. So you have the man is obviously angry, standing at the gas pump, asking just why is gas so expensive. You can see that pump is very tiny, whereas his car is very large. You see demand is related to the car and supply related to the gas pump. So this kind of ties in a few things. Ties in the laws of supply and demand from economics, and really it's talking about why is gas so expensive. Obviously, they're saying that demand is very great. So whenever demand is great, supply goes down, so cost is going to go up, and vice versa. If demand went down, supply would go up, and cost would go down. So what metaphor is created by this superimposition? Again, it's referring to the economic theory of supply versus demand. The scale is meant to show you, obviously, demand is great and supply is minimal. And it's really just, I don't know if this one is specifically trying to say we in the US, although you don't really see any kind of symbol or substitution that you would think makes you think, okay, this is in the US, but demand is so great, and that's why supply is dwindling, which makes gas expensive. All right, fusion is when two images are synthesized or merged into one, creating a visual metaphor. So you can see the soccer ball here on what looks to be where you would normally find like a globe. So what's the context? It was published in July 2006, which I believe is a World Cup year. Don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. But it's just kind of what two ideas is it tying together? So it's tying the world and the soccer ball together. So obviously that would make me think World Cup or soccer, some unifying experience for the world. And that's kind of the message that they're trying to convey there. Synecdoche is a part represents the whole. Consider what attributes this device highlights. So you can see a shepherd's crook on the ground here with the words John Paul II carved into it. All the sheep are gathered around it. Obviously, the shepherd appears to be gone, and the sheep have a sad look on their face. So what two elements make up this synecdoche? So here, with the missing shepherd, I'm assuming this is around the death of John Paul II. So you can see the shepherd's gone, which would make all the sheep very sad. So John Paul II, as the Pope, kind of represents the Catholic Church. The sheep represent the people looking for someone to guide them, which is, of course, an allusion to the Bible. So what's the effect of the synecdoche? What does it highlight about Pope John Paul II? And you can see with all the sheep around him are sad. He's seen as a shepherd. That must mean he's was a good leader of his people. And so now the sheep are just kind of looking for some sort of direction. Juxtaposition. So again, this works for literary terms as well. It's when you place binary opposites, so two things that are very different side by side to draw attention to their differences. So you have the Great Gatsby Society. So obviously this is a play on the Great Gatsby. You can see a reference to Old Sport, which Gatsby says quite a bit in that novel. And here it's just trying to portray the difference between the wealthy and the working class. The wealthy here, and it looks like the cause is jobs and outsourcing. The wealthy are saying, I don't see the problem. And the poor on the other side are saying, oh, I don't have time to explain it to you because I got about 15 jobs to do. So when you think of the Great Gatsby, you think of really material excess. You think of the Roaring '20s. So the idea that poverty doesn't exist. So you have this represented by this man over here who just doesn't see the problem. So that's how it relates back to the Great Gatsby. All right, so this is a more current one. We can see somebody with the American flag. So typical American citizen looking at Trump's wall on the way to Mexico, and then a split image with Bernie's wall, and you can see there is you can see the red star on this guy's helmet, which usually signifies communism or socialism, and he's standing guard at the wall. So I'm not sure exactly what the cartoonist is going for here. It seems like you can't really tell if this person supports the wall or doesn't support the wall, but you can see Bernie's wall with the extra guard. You can see his eye kind of popping up. So that was more of an extreme reaction. So even if he's for or against the wall, he believes it's better than if Bernie Sanders had been elected. I just realized I pronounced this wrong. It's actually pronounced chiasmus. Transposing words, crossing over to create a novel meaning out of a more commonly expected idea. So we're all familiar with devil's food cake, so it kind of plays with the idea of an angel receiving devil's food cake and being like, I'm not sure I can have this, doesn't seem right. So they contrast this with a devil getting an angel food cake and being surprised. Another example of chiasmus, because it's kind of a hard one to really figure out. It's basically just transposing parts from statement A into statement B. So never let a fool kiss you or let a kiss fool you. So you can see kind of that transverse. Fool, kiss, kiss, fool. So it reorders the keywords in the sentence there from the first part to the second part. This is also used in literature as well. All right, a narrative is a current event. It's linked to a future outcome, suggesting a narrative structure. So you see this is a little bit different as there's multiple squares here. You can see it also tells a story rather than telling you to just analyze this image. So it says, what's the matter, Sam? Again, we have the indexable symbol, Uncle Sam representing the United States. I'm depressed. And the therapist says, you're not in a depression, only a recession. So this is obviously a reference to the Great Recession from the last decade. And so Uncle Sam says, so I'm only recessed. And the therapist answers with, I couldn't have said it better. Now get off that couch and go spend your way to happiness. So this is kind of dealing with some people's thoughts that trying to spend your way out of a recession is kind of a crazy thing. So it ties back to the idea of a man at a therapist's office. All right. Illusion. So some of these references you might not get just because they're a little bit older. But illusion is when a cartoonist creates an analogy by drawing on a wide bank of cultural knowledge. So you're alluding to something that's supposed to be pretty well known that most people can look at and say, okay, that's this. So here we have an image of, and I'm blanking on the name, so I'm going to move to the next slide as well. Elmer Fudd. So Elmer Fudd and VP on there, I'm assuming it's going to mean vice president, looking for Osama bin Laden. So this is, I'm guessing, reference to Dick Cheney, because Dick Cheney is infamous for shooting a friend in a hunting accident. So I'm assuming that's what it's a reference to. This one down here is a reference to an old children's song, which I don't think Jack Sprat nursery rhyme. I'm not familiar with it myself. You can see, again, we have another image of a border wall. This one's made in Berlin, so that's a reference to the Berlin Wall, which Ronald Reagan is famous for telling them to tear down. And of course, the get out of jail free card is a reference to the game Monopoly. All right, so now that you've kind of walked you through some of these cartoons here, what I want you to do for your assignment today, head over to Google Classroom, and you'll basically just be doing an analysis of this particular cartoon. Try to use some of the words that we went through in the presentation when you're analyzing this. Think about so obviously this is meant to represent Uncle Sam. Think about posture. Think about how things in the picture relate to other things. Eyes closed could represent something. You can see the elongated nose. What's that a reference to? Think famous Disney cartoon. And then the people over here in poverty. All right, so head on over to Google Classroom and complete the assignment for today.